This is Creative Banter, a creativity and philosophy-focused podcast hosted by Cody Schultz and Ben Horn. Artist residencies, weather, and biking start off this week's episode before we delve into Ben's perceptions about his upcoming videos and newly scanned photographs. We speak on the idea of flipping photographs, both to alter our perception of them, as well as an editing technique. Our conversation shifts toward that of YouTube, sparked by ideas found in a video by Neistat. We end this week speaking on self-publishing books and the merits of physical versus electronic books. Let's dive right into it, shall we? I was talking to fellow photographer David Hunter. I think you've spoken to him before.
Yeah.
He's done like a bunch of artist residencies and everything. I was talking to him about like how to get started with artist residencies, because there's something that I always thought about doing. Back in, I think, August, I was looking at the form to fill out for Acadias.
Mm-hmm.
But never ended up like pulling the trigger with it for one reason or another. It was just kind of like intimidating. Like you always get that feeling like, oh, I'm not good enough for this. I'll never be selected. Kind of like imposter syndrome, maybe.
Yeah, almost like a contest or something like that in a way. Probably similar thoughts.
Yeah. Like one of those deals of, oh, there's so many better photographers that are applying to this, so why should I bother?
Mm-hmm.
So I'd contacted him, or actually he had contacted me. After one of our episodes talking about teaching, and he's a fellow teacher. He is more with kindergarten and that kind of deal, so not my kind of style, and I bless him for the with dealing with that, especially as a male educator. That's not very often seen.
Yeah.
But he had sent me an email with some thoughts on teaching and how he goes about it with artist residencies and all of that, and we had a phone call the other week, this past weekend actually, and he gave me a bunch of tips on applying to these different places and kind of figuring out how to go about it. So it's something that's more on my mind now, trying to just wait for these opportunities to arise and seeing what kind of like local conservancies have openings or opportunities like this where I could work and partner with them for the good of nature. Really.
Yeah.
So
Isn't he on one right now? I think I saw on social media. I don't know if it was something that was recent or if he's currently on one of the residencies. I can't remember where it was, but the moment you said that, I was immediately, there was a post that came to mind, and I forget where it was.
Yeah, I don't know if he's currently doing a residency. I know that he has been posting to his Instagram. He was telling me about this little project that he's doing because he had a question about ebooks and what software I use for creating those versus what you use and that kind of deal. About doing like more informational kind of things. So the one that he had sent me was about like the petrified forests and the photographs that he'd taken in that area and how these forests become petrified, how like just different information about them, really, like the more scientific information and kind of deal, more raising awareness, which I think is a fantastic idea. Looks good so far what he has. So, yeah. But I'm not sure that he's on any residencies now because of teaching.
That's right.
It's really,
maybe it was
really difficult to get away for a month.
That I'd seen or something.
Yeah. Have you ever thought of doing any kind of residencies or not really?
See, I know some people who have done them as well, and it's a very interesting approach, and also being able to have access to some of these areas, especially for such a decent duration of time, because aren't many of them like roughly a month or so? Isn't that? I'm sure it probably varies.
Most
by
of
location.
them are like 2 weeks to 4 weeks.
Okay,
it's kind of like the typical average, and most of them occur during like the summer months because you have the most access. Plus, it's easier on the parks.
Yeah, honestly, I haven't considered it too seriously. I think for my approach, which is just a very concentrated approach where I just try to be as productive as I can while I'm there, I think I would just burn out way too fast. And I don't think I could pace myself. Like, I think it's like pretty much impossible for me to pace myself at a point where I could be there for, 3-4 weeks or whatever and still be into it. I think I would just be completely burnt out and completely like mind dead, just brain dead by the end of it. So no, I haven't, but I know some people who've done it, and I know that they've really enjoyed the experience. And the other thing is I imagine it varies from park to park, but do you know if they post any numbers in terms of how many people apply to the various residencies?
I'm not too sure on that one.
Because I would imagine that some of them are extremely competitive, and maybe other ones are not quite as competitive. But I have no clue how many people actually apply, whether it's hundreds or tens or twos or thousands. I don't know, but I can see how for certain areas,
yeah, I know
nice.
It's Zion and like Death Valley, Acadia, like the real Yosemite, the real well-known parks, the ones that everyone flocks to anyway. Those are the ones that most people want to go to and get artist residencies in. So that's one thing that David was telling me, like, go look for some of the smaller parks. Unfortunately, the one that's the application period just closed, I think yesterday. And I was going to apply for it. It's Great Basin National Park, I believe.
Okay, yeah, I know he's been up there
a much
before.
Smaller park.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to apply to that one, but the problem with it was that they want an actual CD with all of your information, like a physical CD.
Yeah.
I'm like,
we have a barrier for
you're
entry.
stuck back in like the 90s now.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm like, my Mac doesn't have any capability for that. Like,
yeah.
So now I was trying to figure out, like, okay, how would I be able to do this, if at all? And between schoolwork and everything else, I just was like, all right, we'll just wait. Like, this is one that I'll keep in the back of my mind and I'll definitely apply to, but not right now, because that barrier to entry is kind of steep, as dumb as it sounds.
Yeah.
Like, we're so far past CDs that, like, my computer doesn't even have that capability anymore. So,
and I wonder if for some of the artists in residence, I know that in many of them, they, included in it is, where you're going to be staying for that amount of time, whether they're putting you up in a lodge or if there's a specific cabin or something. I can also see how if a person had like a motorhome or an RV or something like that, where that is something that they're able to use, and basically, their campground fees are paid as part of it. I mean, I can see how if one had their own degree of infrastructure a little bit, which would make it a little bit easier to spend that much time in the field, I see how that could perhaps be a beneficial thing. I could also
see how see why the parks wouldn't want to do that, though, because they already have, like, okay, this is our artist residency cabin and this is where they stay. We don't have to worry about the campgrounds being taken up by them or anything like that. Like, this is what we can offer. I mean, I know it sounds dumb, but there's a park. It actually is Great Basin, now that I think about it better. Great Basin has 2 different programs. So they just started off with one where it's like more backpacking, more backcountry kind of camping for that duration of time. So they supply you with like the tent and the basic camping necessities. That one is limited to those on the West Coast. So like I can't apply for that one, which is kind of weird, but whatever.
That is strange.
But like you mentioned about like an RV. Well, why wouldn't someone just be able to like camp instead of being in a log cabin or something? Like, so there's definitely got to be some kind of reason as to why they wouldn't want to allow that. Like, that way they can keep track of where the artist resident is in terms of like for the duration of the time. That way, if they have to check on them, that kind of deal, maybe. Yeah, I'm not too sure, but I know that it's it's definitely something that I want to try and get a part of in time. So we'll see how that goes through.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. I'll be curious to see how that works out.
Yeah, he was also telling me, because we were supposed to talk this past weekend, and we were supposed to talk, I think, this last Friday, but then he emailed me and said that something had come up, he wasn't able to. And then he emailed me, I think, again Saturday, and he's like, hey, if you've got time on Sunday to talk, like, because of all the weather that they were having.
Yeah.
And yeah, I had mentioned to him when we got on the phone that how last week you had said about snow down to like 1,000-foot elevation or something crazy like that. So do you get hit with any of that fun weather storms?
You know, we had a lot of wind. My neighbor had 2 trees, they're small trees, but 2 trees go down, and then one of their a bigger tree in the front yard started leaning heavily, and so they had it trimmed to kind of hopefully counteract that. But yeah, we had a lot of wind, and we didn't end up getting the snow here where I live. It stayed a bit above that, but we did yesterday. We had this big mean cloud that came over and just it dropped so much of this really fine hail that my whole front yard the roof was white, the front yard was white with everything, and even up until noon today there was still some of that hail on the cushions of the patio furniture in the backyard. But yeah, it ended up being quite a storm. There's people that are living in, so there's a mountain range kind of to the east of Los Angeles, south and to the east a little bit. And some of those peaks get up to about 10,000 feet, but there's areas up there, Big Bear and some other towns up there. And there's like, 6 to 8 feet of snow, and there's people that are like trapped in their homes. So this was a rather monumental storm, series of storms really. But it's blue skies today. It's warm today. Just before we recorded, I took Oliver out for a second waddle, just because
I love that.
I've been tired of looking at my screen all day long. It's just, I mean, I'm editing the videos, which is fine, but just being inside all day, and I think especially after having so many, I mean, I love rain, but after having so many days of it, it just starts to get old. And especially since I heavily rely on exercise and physical activity, just for all the benefits that it provides in terms of, you feel great afterwards and everything. And with the weather the way that it's been and the amount of rain it's had, there's just, the hillsides are just leaking water, and like the gutters are full of water still. And I'm looking at this going like, it's going to be like 2 weeks until I can go skating again, just because there's just going to be so much water on the pavement in the areas where I go. And so that kind of has me bummed out. And I've also been thinking, since exercise is such a big thing for me, I've been thinking about getting a road bike. And so something that I could take on a non-photo trip to a place like Death Valley, or over to Zion, and just to be able to see some of these areas from a different perspective, since you can't take skates in some of those places. But it definitely has me rethinking things a little bit. And so I know that when we were talking during summertime or so, when I'd gotten the skates, and how the guys on the bikes, if they're wearing spandex, I'm not faster than them.
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
the people that I don't know, maybe I'll be that spandex guy. I don't know. We'll see. But I got a feeling I might go in that direction. Not photo related, but just to be able to see some of these areas I love and some of these roads, just being on a bike, I think would be kind of fun.
I've always enjoyed biking. Like I had a bike a while back, and then it was so old. I think it was my cousin's at one point.
Yeah.
And we had it, and when we moved to this new house 10 years ago or so, that was like the one big thing. Like I'd be biking around because we live by back road farm country kind of deal, so it's not that big of a deal for me to hop on the bike and bike into the nearest town and then take like a 3 or so hour trip kind of deal.
Yeah.
It was great. It was so difficult just though because of all the hills, because it's so like hilly where we are.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed the hell out of it. And now that I don't have a bike anymore, I'm kind of like, I've thought about getting one, but then you get into a period of weather like this, what we've been having, where it's like Tuesday we had snow, and then Wednesday was cold, and today it's warm. Like,
yeah,
it's so messed up and not consistent. So trying to get out and actually enjoy it on a regular basis, I'm better off just going to the gym and running like I have been. So
yeah,
but I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know that I would ever bike in the woods though. Like,
yeah,
I could see the biking in farmland.
Yeah, it would give a different perspective on things. I think maybe be able to see things without the pressure of having to photograph it. I see how that could be potentially a good thing. The bike I have now, I got it when I was in like the 6th grade. Still works.
Yeah.
But something a little nicer and faster and all that.
The problem with biking in the woods though is like, because of all of the hills and everything, you're going by at such a quick pace most of the time. Like it's not really like a leisurely bike ride. It's more of like true mountain biking when you're through most of these woods. I'm sure you could go slower through it, but
yeah,
at the same time, why wouldn't you want to just cruise through it real fast? Because adrenaline. But so that's like a totally different kind of thing. Like,
yeah,
you're going from seeing things, real intimate details, and being able to pick out the mushrooms on the ground to trampling all over the mushrooms on the ground.
Yeah, just destroying everything in your path.
Yeah, really. So,
but also during all of the storms we've had, I've been scanning my film from Death Valley and from Zion, and at this point, I'd say that there are 8 images that I'm very happy with. Which is a significantly higher number than I was thinking after having looked at the images from Death Valley for the first time. I just wasn't really blown away by them, but I've been scanning them, and I think my decision on the vast majority of the stuff was very good. There's one image that just had a little bit of a weird feeling to it. I couldn't quite place what it was, but then I flipped it horizontally, and then it looks just fine now. And so just as a reminder to those listening that sometimes if an image just doesn't quite feel right, if there's something just off by a little bit, even though technically everything seems like it's pretty spot on, try flipping it, and you might find that it works pretty well. This is, I don't know, maybe the 3rd image through the years or 4th image through the years. I found that that's the recipe that makes it work.
Yeah, I've heard that from quite a few different photographers, that flipping it around helps.
Yeah, it's really kind of it's bizarre how well that can work. And it's a sort of thing where once you do that, then you can figure out exactly why it is that the image works, and why it didn't work before. It could just be the placement of two particular subjects and the way that you kind of view things, and your eye moves through it's a bizarre thing, but it works really, really well.
Do you flip your images around when you're editing them, or do you keep it like how it is true to orientation? Because I know, like, I think Simon Baxter will rotate his image like upside down, invert, or whatever, in order to like abstract it to see what kind of things are still really poignant.
I haven't done that. I did watch that video from him, so I've seen that technique of his, and it's a very fascinating process. I haven't had the need to do that. One thing I will do though is when tweaking an image, I will zoom in quite a bit to look at some of the smaller details as I'm adjusting, like the curves or whatever. And then I'll also do it as I'm looking at it further away. Because sometimes you can get a little better feel for things if you kind of zoom in real close to it as you're tweaking something, and then you kind of zoom back out again. So I'll do that. I guess it's kind of a different way of abstracting things a little bit, but not to the point of, flipping it upside down. Though I definitely see the value for doing something along those lines.
Have you scanned? So you scanned all of your images, or have you worked through your black and white or anything yet?
I scanned one of them. I just wasn't blown away by it. It seems like no matter what I do, they're pretty overexposed looking on the scanner. I wonder if there's a different technique I need to do with regard to the scanning process. Because looking at the negative, it looks like it's not blown out. I mean, it looks like there's plenty of detail in the highlights. But by the time I put it on the scanner, it just, something is not translating right, and I don't quite know what it is.
Are you using the Epson software or the Silverfast?
I'm using the Silverfast.
Okay.
I haven't tried the Epson stuff.
I'd be curious to compare what settings you have.
But yeah, I was just using just the default stuff, and it was, I don't know. I don't quite know why it's turning out the way it is, but just the highlights are just really not great. It's weird. And I even tried scanning it as color and then just doing everything, like all the inverting and stuff in Photoshop, but it just, for whatever reason, it just was not liking it. But it's scanning the transparencies perfectly fine. I have some transparencies that are rather demanding when it comes to shadows, some that are rather demanding when it comes to highlights, and it gets everything perfectly fine from those. But for whatever reason, just the black and white, it does not like them.
I've had difficulty with it in the past doing weird things with scans, and then I've kind of been able to work things out at least a little bit. So,
because in the past, when I scanned black and white, it was very forgiving and it was pretty straightforward. But this, I'm just like, something is clearly off, but I just don't have time right now to sort through that. And another thing too, when it comes to like the videos and stuff, all the Death Valley videos have come together pretty well. I haven't done any of the voiceover stuff, or I haven't done any of that stuff yet, but I've just kind of edited stuff together and dropped all the stuff in and adjusted the timing and the audio and such. But when I did the Zion series, I wasn't really putting as much effort into it as I should have. So I don't have as many. I have clips of me shooting the photos, and I have some clips of me kind of narrating what, talking about the photo I shot or what my plan is for the day or stuff like that. But it's not really coming together as well because I just didn't do as much work as I really should have in the field. But then when I was taking Oliver for the Waddle, I was thinking that maybe what I should do is I should dip back into the journal that I kept and see if simply find if there's some entries in there that I could basically read and just make that kind of some of the voiceover for the see, and perhaps it's kind of a different style of video. But we'll see. And I think that's one of the reasons why I was felt a little off today, because I'm like, oh man, these Zion videos aren't really coming together as much as I would like. But I think perhaps it's just a reason for me to try something a little different and see if I can maybe tie into the
I think
the
that
written
tie-in
journals
would be really
more.
nice. Just as a nice, like, here's something else that I'm doing, and this is why I enjoy doing it and implementing that. And here's something that if you want to see these actual written journals, then here, go to this kind of ordeal. It would be cool to see.
Yeah.
But speaking on videos too, I was watching, you're familiar with Casey Neistat, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I've mentioned his brother Van before. I've been watching some of his videos, and recently he put up one that kind of, in the very beginning at least, he went over what was coming to Patreon and what was going to be new for his Patreon. And he mentioned that he's going to be taking a new approach to YouTube and to Patreon. So for this year, the YouTube videos, his YouTube channel, will be 6 months behind the Patreon channel.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Which is, yeah, it's a really fascinating idea. So how he's doing this is he'll release like one video to Patreon, then one to YouTube that's also on Patreon. So it's going to be like 2 on Patreon, 1 on YouTube each month or something like that. Some kind of combination like that. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I thought it was a really fascinating approach to giving further incentive to Patreon without creating more work for you as a creator, because you're already making these videos. Now you're just posting them a bit earlier. And then after that 6-month period or whatever has elapsed, after a year has elapsed, everything will then go back onto YouTube as well. So if you want it early, you'll just have to join the Patreon.
Huh. Yeah. And that's, I mean, also at about a 6-month delay where like the seasons don't really match up anymore, I definitely see how that would leave a person, you know, if they're watching videos where it's a bit more cold and wintry and stuff and it's August, you know, that could definitely be a compelling thing for a person to want to be a little more up to date on stuff. And you know, and once a system like that is in place, you know, like just like you said, it doesn't involve any additional work. You just schedule them out, you know, quite a ways ahead of time. But that is a very interesting approach. And I also wonder if a person is doing something along those lines, whether that would shape the way that they actually do the videos, in terms of, with the primary emphasis being Patreon and less on YouTube, whether people will play less to the YouTube algorithm and to, you know, the clickbait thumbnails and all that sort of stuff, whether it'll influence that sort of stuff as well.
I see what you're saying, that people would maybe do less clickbait if they're pandering for Patreon more so. Don't have to worry so much about the algorithm.
Yeah.
It's an approach that I could see a lot more people taking, like in the future, where you're starting to get away from YouTube, but you know that you can't cut those ties just yet. Like, you still need the algorithm for that marketing potential, but eventually you plan on getting rid of YouTube entirely. So I don't know how well it would work for videos like yours, where it's more like series based. It would almost have to be like you post your collection of videos strictly to Patreon, and then a few months later you post them to YouTube.
Yeah, that is definitely a tricky one, and it is interesting to see how people are getting creative in finding different ways like that, as opposed to simply just following the formula that's already set in place. So I do appreciate that style of thinking, because it's definitely something that's a bit better than just the formulaic stuff that it seems everything else has become.
Yeah. One other thing that I wanted to talk about. So we mentioned Derek Sivers last week a little bit. He has now, I think, 4 books that are out. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what I've learned about his like approach to his books, because I think it's interesting in a kind of away from technology, away from big company reliance sort of way. So a little bit of backstory from what I've collected. So Derek had been contacted by Seth Godin, who is this like marketing mastermind, real popular kind of deal if you're not familiar with him. He was contacted by him a couple years ago, and because Seth was making this this publishing company, and he wanted Derek Sivers to be the first person to publish a book through this company. So Derek wrote this book in about 10 days or so. It was published by Godin about a week later. So really fast turnaround time.
Huh.
Fast forward a few years, and Godin's publishing company is purchased by Penguin, which publishes a ton of books.
Yeah.
Well, the problem that Derek came across was, even though he loved everything about Penguin, he had just published these 3 other books, and he had self-published them. And he was like, well, this is kind of weird. Like, I have one that's I don't have any publishing rights to. I can't do what I want with the book. But I have these other 3 that I can do whatever I want with. Needless to say, he purchased the publishing rights back from Penguin, so that way he could publish his books how he wants.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that he does, and why he wanted this control, was his way of selling books is very non-traditional. Like, Amazon would absolutely hate him, because for $15 you buy the digital copy, and that's digital in terms of ebook, that's audiobook, that's everything. Like, you get, if there's any kind of, he says that if there's any kind of like new hologram kind of thing or whatever in the future, you'll get that too. Like, it's $15 for the content, and then if you want like a hardcover book, it's just whatever the cost of it is for him for at that price. So it's like $4. And then any copy that you want past that initial copy, if it's paper, is another $4. So you can buy the first book, a paper copy, at $19, then the next one at $4, then the next one at $4 of that same book. It's a really weird approach, but it's gives him a ton of flexibility. Plus, he likes to do like these personalized dedications in the ebooks or in the audiobooks. So like, if you want to dedicate it for, I don't even know how much more he charges, if at all, or whatever, but he'll put in a like minute long dedication, 30 second long dedication into the audiobook. So personalize it for you like that, which I think is just really interesting. And it just, all of this has me thinking about like the possibilities of self-publishing and how to go about it when I eventually do write my own book, however form that ends up taking. Like, do we truly need to rely so heavily on publishing companies and on Amazon and those kind of places in order to make any sort of living or get our work out there in such a way? So
yeah, and it's a tricky thing, because with Amazon or with any of these other companies, obviously you gain a significantly larger audience, but at the same time, you also give away a good chunk of the profits. And I mean, I guess it all comes down to finding a way to building up your own audience to enough where you're not really working for anyone. You're not, just another piece of this greater machine that is Amazon. And I'm sure if one does have stuff listed there, then you have to do certain things in order for it to stand out and get attention and stuff, which probably takes away from the actual creative process and everything that goes into creating something like that. It would be interesting to know for about the author that you're talking about, whether a lot of people do prefer the sort of the ebook, the electronic stuff, or whether they still go to print, and kind of where the percentages are for that. Because that also speaks of, with an approach like that, it's also interesting. I would imagine that a lot of it's going to be electronic, but
I'm not quite sure what the split there is for his audience. In the podcast that I was listening to, the interview that he had done, he had mentioned that out of the 3 books that he had, he's made like $500,000, something like that, from the sales of them. Which, I mean, this guy's like loaded. He sold, he had created CD Baby back in 1990s or so, and sold it in 2008 for like $22 million. So he doesn't worry about money or working for money or anything. Everything he creates, like, the profit that he makes off of these books, he's donating to charity anyway.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's a good question of whether people are going to be purchasing the ebook versus that $4 extra for a physical copy. I mean, I could see people purchasing the ebook, reading it, and being like, oh, this would be really good for so-and-so. I'm going to purchase a couple copies. Since they're only $4 each, I'll purchase 5 copies and give them away to friends or for gifts or whatever.
Yeah, that is interesting. And I will say that overall, I think to me, the thought of producing physically printed stuff seems a little bit less attractive than it used to be. Just in some ways, some of it just feels like it's a bit wasteful. So I wonder if other people have that, because I mean I have a Kindle and all the reading I do is on the Kindle. I know that in the past I think you had mentioned that you're not a fan of it, if I remember right.
Yeah, I've switched over recently. The past few months, I've been reading nothing but physical books. And a lot of that is just because I'm staring at my computer screens for so much. And the last thing I want to do is stare at another screen. Plus, it's been proven, like when we write something by hand, when we read a physical book, there's differences in how we take in that knowledge and what we remember and all of that than when we do the alternative, even if it's the alternative with technology. But yeah, I love the feel of paper anymore, and having a physical copy and highlighting everything and taking notes in the margins, that kind of deal. So I don't know, but
yeah, and I don't think I don't think I read enough for that to sway me. For me, the fact that I can go on a trip and bring a Kindle along and have a few books waiting on there, for me, it's about the convenience. But I completely understand how it's a different approach when you're reading a physical book, and even to simple things like looking at it. How many pages do I have left? This side is thinner than this side. This side is thicker. You know, stuff like that. The tangibility of flipping the pages. Like you said, being able to highlight things, write notes, stuff like that. That stuff mostly is not the same experience on
Another
Kindle.
big thing with me is I like to be able to see what books I have to read yet, and my list of books is constantly growing. So having all the books organized on my bookshelf where I can go up to it and say, all right, these 2 shelves are full of books where I need to read these, and these 3 shelves are full of books that have already been read. I can kind of see my progress through the years, that I can't necessarily see that in the same manner with Kindle. So that plays a part too.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, there's definitely, and even just the lag of kind of scrolling through the Kindle to pick the books and stuff like that. I could definitely agree. It's a completely different sort of experience for that. But I guess my question is, so what do you do with all of the books when you read them? Do you give them away? What do you do with them?
I keep them because I reference them. I'll take notes on them.
Okay. That's true with all the notes and such.
Yeah, I take a lot of notes with my books. I'm constantly highlighting different passages and stuff, different things that I've learned that I want to use. So I don't necessarily give away books or donate them, mainly because I'm highlighting so much and writing in them. It kind of feels like a disservice. So for my student teaching with my mentor teacher, he has a whole library of books that I've mentioned before. And there are a couple in there that I would like to read. There's one on Columbine, on the school shooting Columbine from 1999. And I would love to read that book because it's a major book and it's just fascinating information. But I know that I can't borrow it from him because he'll get it back and it'll be covered in yellow highlight marks and pencil drawings or notes or whatever. And then when a student decides to read that next or whatever, then they're going to look in it and be like, what the hell? Like, it's going to be a distraction for their comprehension. So
yeah, you need to have like a secret highlighter, like one of those things where only under like certain light you can see it. That way you can have all the notes in there.
Invisible ink, yeah.
Yeah. And they won't be any the wiser, but you'll have all the stuff in there.
Yeah, I don't know. Eventually I'll probably go back to my Kindle and be swayed back towards that, just because, like you said, the convenience of it is just, it can't be outdone by paper. But for right now, until I can get to a point where I'm away from the screen more, maybe this summer I'll start to go back to the Kindle, just because it's like traveling here and there, especially going to Colorado. I cannot imagine taking 3 or 4 books with me that I hope to get through, and trying to carry those around would be a pain. But
yeah, though the thought of sitting there in some beautiful meadow somewhere with trees and all kinds of stuff and just sit there flipping through a book, I gotta say that does actually sound pretty nice. I hope you enjoyed our creative banter. You can learn more about Cody's work by visiting his website, codyschultz.com, and you can find my work at benhorn.com. For further discussion, join us at patreon.com/creativebanter. It's a place where we can interact with you, the listener. And although we greatly appreciate those who contribute by joining a tier, discussions are open to everyone, whether you're a paying member or not. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you around next time.